From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm Eric Cressey, and I'm really excited that we've got an awesome guest for you today in two-time American League Cy Young Award winner Corey Kluber. He's been a mainstay at CSP since 2010, and we really got to know him well. And I think it's really led us to a position we got some good questions to ask where we can talk about his long-term approach to development, what he does between starts, what he does between pitches, everything from pitch design to training to throwing programs, how he reads hitters, and a lot of great stuff. So I think this is going to be an excellent episode that really gets you to appreciate not just how much of a competitor Corey is, but how much pride he takes in his craft and what he brings to the table each day as a big league pitcher. With that said, this episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's an all-in-one superfood supplement with 75 whole food sourced ingredients. They're designed to support your body's nutritional needs across 5 critical areas of health: energy, immunity, gut health, hormonal support, and healthy aging. If you jump over to athleticgreens.com/Cressey, you can claim a special offer today of 20 free travel packets valued at $79 with your first purchase. In spite of the fact that I'm a supplement minimalist, this is a product that I recommend to just about all of our clients. I really view it a lot more like a whole food nutritional insurance policy. They've got ingredients that have been carefully selected at the highest quality that range from essential vitamins and minerals to digestive enzymes to prebiotics and probiotics. All this is done maintaining a zero compromise approach in the formulation. It's all plant-based, sourced from whole foods of the highest quality. There's no chemicals, artificial colors, sweeteners, artificial flavors, added sugar, pesticides, wheat, dairy, gluten. It's really good for just about everybody. And really, I love it on our athlete side for younger athletes who may have holes in their diets, and also like a lot for college and pro athletes who may have complex travel schedules where quality food options aren't always on hand. The travel packets are particularly clutch when our athletes go on the road and need to kind of fill in the cracks on whatever it is they're eating. So really like it from a convenience standpoint, and really on a personal level. I'm a husband, I'm a father of 3 kids, age 4 and under, an entrepreneur with multiple businesses in multiple states, and an avid lifter, and we split our time between 2 parts of the country. So needless to say, the Cressey life can be stressful, and sleep deprivation is a real thing. With that in mind, I lean heavily on Athletic Greens for part of my immune support, and I know my wife really, really likes it, and we believe firmly that it's made a big difference in keeping us healthy in spite of this crazy Cressey lifestyle we live. So with that said, I'd encourage you to get all your vital nutrition in 30 seconds or less. You can head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey. That's CRESSEY, and they've got a special gift of 20 free travel packets worth $79. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey. Now, with all this out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. Today's guest is a pitcher for the Cleveland Indians who grew up in Texas and went on to attend Stetson University, where he was the Atlantic Sun Conference Pitcher of the Year in 2007. He was drafted by the Padres in the 4th round of the 2007 MLB draft, and shortly thereafter was traded to the Indians in 2010. He made his major league debut in September of 2011, and after that established himself as a mainstay in their rotation in 2013. He's since gone on to be an All-Star 3 times, while winning the AL Cy Young in 2014 and 2017, with top 10 finishes in every year since 2014. He's one of only 2 pitchers on the planet who has thrown 200-plus innings and had 200-plus strikeouts in each of the last 5 seasons, and the only pitcher that has done so while throwing 2 complete games in each of those seasons. He's also been a Cressey Sports Performance guy since the offseason of 2010 and is a mainstay at our Massachusetts facility in the offseason. We're excited to welcome Corey Kluber. Hey, Corey, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
This is going to be a lot of fun. So obviously I've known you for probably over 10 years now. I was actually joking as I wrote out the questions on this, that on your initial health history at Cressey Sports Performance, your wife's maiden name was actually listed. So we've been working together since before you were married, which is probably a decade now. So here's the thing I want to ask you is, So when you first came in, we did our night with the pros at the facility in Massachusetts, and I'll distinctly remember a question someone asked about how you wound up at Stetson, being a Texas guy. What was it about Stetson, which now has 2 Cy Young Award winners under its belt, that was what drew you there out of high school?
I mean, I think it was a couple different things. I looked at schools in Florida, I looked at schools in Texas, looked at schools out west. Some of them I got less of an opportunity at Stetson. Some of them I might have had an equal opportunity, but I think the 2 things that kind of drove me the most were, number one, it was where I felt the most comfortable when I went on my visit. I felt like the smaller school kind of was a good fit for me, and I liked everybody that was involved with the program that I met and stuff. I felt like I would fit in right away. And then the second reason was I was going to have an opportunity to earn a chance to play right away. I wasn't going to be given anything, but there's also some bigger schools I looked at where it's kind of, you go in there and you just sit your freshman year and you learn and you redshirt, and then your second year you play. And that I didn't want to do that. I didn't feel like it had much benefit to me to go to a bigger name school but not have a chance to do anything for a year.
Absolutely. So when you first got there, did you struggle much, or was it the kind of thing where you hit the ground running and handled college stuff particularly well?
From the college standpoint, I think I was fine. From the baseball standpoint, yeah, I definitely had some struggles early on. I think that bump up in competition, just learning how to face better hitters more consistently. I mean, obviously a college lineup is going to be deeper than a high school lineup. There's different ways you got to pitch to guys, different things work, don't work. So I think there's definitely some bumps in the road there early on, but I think that the one thing that I did well, I guess, was being open to learning and being coached. I think that I've always liked to be coached and work on things. Not really one of those guys that wants to be left alone and figure it out on my own. So I think that having coaches that gave me good information and helped me to address areas that might help me improve went a long ways.
Mm-hmm. And that actually kind of feeds right into the next question. So a lot of times with like the guys that we have in, people often ask what the biggest things that they can learn from our more successful athletes. So you hear about like a Scherzer, and I always emphasize like Max always finds a way to make things competitive. Like he only knows competing. You look at like a Syndergaard, Noah's like a real nerd for reading about training and nutrition. Like he's a real student of the game. And when people ask me about you, I always emphasize the concepts of process and precision, that every rep is exactly the same. It's executed flawlessly, whether we're talking about catch play at 60 feet, long toss at 200, lifting, mobility work. There's just so much attention to detail, and I don't think people realize that like you just didn't you weren't born a Cy Young Award winner. They don't realize that you racked up over 700 innings in parts of 8 seasons in the minor leagues. Was that a blessing for you, and that it gave you a chance to kind of learn the process and critically differentiate between what are bad processes versus bad outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that obviously everybody would like to get to the big leagues, as soon as possible. But I think that the path that I did take of going through struggles and spending a lot of time having to learn to make adjustments and, like you said, learn those processes, learn what works for me, what doesn't work for me. I think I did it for a long enough period of time in the minor leagues. I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do or what I needed to do. So at that point, when I did finally make it to the major leagues, I wasn't still searching for those routines, that process that worked for me. I think I had an idea of what I, at least physically, wanted to do or needed to do. And then from that point in time, it's all about learning, learning the league, learning hitters. And at least if you have that foundation or that base of what you need to do to get yourself prepared physically, then the rest of it is just kind of educating yourself.
Would you say that was like a nature or nurture thing? Like, did you have that precision and attention to detail when you were, were you 13, or is it something you've always had, or you had to hone it by being really cognizant of specific practices over the years?
I mean, I think I always enjoyed, like, the process of stuff. Like I enjoyed when I was a kid, I enjoyed like hitting off a tee instead of just going and having somebody throw to me or things like that. But I think that at the same time, the maybe the patience required to approach things that way probably develops over time. I think that initially it might be difficult to kind of talk yourself into taking the time to go through a 30-minute movement routine with attention to detail, just because it can get boring. You don't necessarily feel like there's a direct result from it.
Yeah.
But I think it's just learning that patience to do it properly, and over time, the more you do it, the more you consistently do it, then you start to see the benefits of it.
Absolutely. And like put into practice. So I'll throw a scenario out. So game 1, 2016 World Series, it was like 38 degrees out. It was freezing cold. It was the night the Cavs got their championship rings next door. So there were so many people in like a small amount of space. You couldn't even send text messages. Like the towers were overloaded. And I'll never forget like watching you. I was in like the left field side, and it was like the pregame warmups. So you're throwing to Perez, who, Gomes had kind of been your regular catcher. So you're somewhat of a new catcher, but someone who's handled you a little bit. While the game is getting ready to go, you and Lester are both out long tossing in the outfield. And I just distinctly remember there were basically the biggest game of your life, and there were about 100 elementary school age kids like getting set up with like the national anthem flag. Like the outfield was just absolute chaos, and I just remember you being like 100% locked in, like nothing else was going on. What goes through your mind in the days and hours ahead of that start? And you went up, I think it was a major league record. You punched out 8 in the first 3 innings. I remember you saying that the baseball felt markedly different when you picked it up, with a playoff ball, before the game got started. Like, talk about that experience just a little bit, and what went into those hours before the game, just to make sure that there's no deviation from the normal process that you've experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whether it's a spring training game or a regular season game, or that year was the first time I'd ever pitched in the playoffs. So my first playoff game, my first World Series game, I think that regardless of what the scenario is for a start, I pretty much follow, the same routine the day of my start. Whether that just creates that, that comfort to follow that routine. I mean, I'm not saying I'm superstitious to the point where I have to put my left sock on before my right or anything like that. But I go through, I try to time out what time I wake up, when I eat throughout that day, just so that I kind of know I'm going to feel a certain way when the game comes. But I mean, I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't, for each one of those playoff starts or ALCS starts or World Series starts, if there wasn't more adrenaline, nerves, all that kind of stuff. And I think that that's natural. I mean, if you didn't have that stuff, it just means that you don't care. But I think that even despite those nerves and that excitement about it, I think that going through that routine kind of works as a way to reassure yourself that, yes, it's the World Series, but it's still something you've done however many times. I think that each kind of step along the way that you go through that, it just kind of brings that level of comfort to, all right, I've been here, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and to the point where, you almost just fall into that routine of, it's my start day, this is what I need to do next, this is what I need to do next, and that kind of blocks out all those extra distractions.
Absolutely. So we'll get a little more specific now. So let's talk about the breaking ball, which is obviously one of the better swing and miss pitches in baseball. And I think you remember you saying you use the same grip still that you learned in college, correct?
Yeah. When I got to college, I basically threw a fastball, a circle changeup, and like a big loopy curveball, which in high school worked great. College didn't work so well. So that was one of those learning moments that we were talking about earlier. My breaking ball didn't, hitters saw it right away, things like that. And we had to work on a new one because this one was completely ineffective. So we initially tried to start throwing a cutter because we thought it would complement my fastball better and not be able to, be something that hitters could pick up as easily. And I think just I've always been somebody who kind of manipulates the ball with my hand. I don't necessarily just grab it and throw it. I kind of like to feel, moving a ball this way, moving a ball that way. And so in trying to make it a cutter, it ended up probably being more of a traditional slider, but it worked at that point in time. And I think just through throwing it more often with that grip and learning it, it kind of developed into what it is now, which is probably in between a slider and a curveball. But yeah, it's the same grip. I mean, it's the same grip that I've used, just learning how to, like I said, manipulate the ball differently to make it maybe have a little more depth or a little more break horizontally, things like that.
Yeah, I know Max, one of the lines that I've heard him drop is that, you need to make sure you learn one breaking ball before you try to learn two. So he's obviously figured out the slider and now added the curveball over the last couple of years. What do you do when you learn a breaking ball with respect to like learning to shape it differently? How long did it take for you to kind of realize that you could make it 82 versus 86 depending on what you wanted to do, and also being careful not to have it kind of blend with your cutter? Do you have any like tips for up and coming athletes who feel like they have one but might have the potential to either do something different with it or actually develop a slider if they have a curveball, or a curveball if they have a slider?
I mean, I agree with Max. I think that you have to become consistent with the one first. You have to get to the point where you feel comfortable repeating it. You can throw where you want to, what the shape of it's going to be, because then you can from that point throw it to certain areas, or based on what a hitter's doing, try to throw it according to them. But then I think as you become more comfortable with that consistency, then you can start to kind of see, okay, this is what I know it does when I do it well. If I'm not doing it well, if I'm leaving it arm side, what's the difference between the two? And then you kind of try to find that middle ground to maybe say, okay, if I'm leaving it arm side, I'm probably getting on the side of it. If I get on the side of it but still get out in front, maybe I'm going to get more of that side to side break. But I have to get out in front with it. If I don't get out in front with it, it's going to be the one that I leave arm side. Or if you're trying to get more depth on it, maybe just getting that little last. For me, the feeling is getting my hand over top of it, just that little extra bit.
And is that stuff you'll find like in the bullpen before a game, like you'll recognize that you're slipping into one of those tendencies and you can make a correction? Or is it one of those things where you have to come back and watch video, whether it's between innings or between games, where you find yourself slipping at times?
Yeah, ideally you could find it in a bullpen or in the middle of an at bat or in the middle of an inning. But sometimes you don't have that feel. I think that some days you have a better feel for pitches than others, and some days if you don't execute a pitch, you can kind of make that recognition right away that this is what I did and this is what I need to do. Or there's also going to be days where you don't execute a pitch and you're not really sure what went wrong. And those are the ones where, whether it be a pitching coach or a catcher, kind of they recognize something, or you have to go back and ideally in between innings try to dissect the problem and figure out how to fix it. Or sometimes even that doesn't work and you got to go back to the drawing board after the start. But I mean, yeah, there's going to be days where things don't feel right. And then I think at that point in time, you just kind of got to get creative in a sense and go out there and, okay, it's not the way I want it to be, but I still got to figure out a way to get outs.
So actually what builds on that. So Rob Friedman, the pitching ninja from Twitter, actually sent me this question to ask you, and it kind of leads into that. He said, he's curious about mentally, what are you doing with your pre-pitch routine? So especially when you look down, and you kind of slowly look up towards the plate, what's going through your mind? Is that a conscious reset that you've developed over the course of time? But and when did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I think that's my way of, I don't even know what I'm doing at 95% of the time, but I think that's just my way of kind of getting myself into, pitch mode. You throw the pitch, you either execute it or you don't, guy gets a hit, whatever, you analyze it. What went wrong? What I do right? This or that? What do I want to throw next? All that kind of stuff. But then I think that at some point in time, you have to make that transfer from analyzing what happened before to now moving on to the next pitch. And I think that that's kind of when I look up, that's kind of when I'm at the point where, all right, I'm ready to throw this pitch now.
You can't be analytical and competitive at the same time.
At least I can't.
Yeah, well, that's a Brian Kaplan line. He's our pitching coordinator in Florida. He's dropped that a number of times with guys, and it makes perfect sense. So let's talk about, obviously one of the big things that took you from, a guy who, as of 2011, 12 was kind of a fringe big leaguer. Even 13, you were up and down just a little bit. And one of the big changes was the work you and Ruben Diablo did in AAA with the Indians. That the addition of the two seam really changed the course of career. So talk a little about what led to the change, and then we'll build on that discussion a little bit.
I mean, in the simplest form, what led to the change is that my fastball wasn't very good. I could always get swing and miss because of my breaking ball, but I walked too many guys because I didn't have fastball command. If I fell behind, I'd get hit around because I didn't have fastball command. I could throw strikes, so to speak, with it, but a lot of times I felt myself being, cautious throwing a fastball or not being aggressive with it because I didn't have the confidence that I could put it where I wanted to. If I needed to throw a strike, I could throw a strike, but it's a pitch that a hitter's, sitting there hoping you throw them. So that's not a good feeling. We basically got to a point where I had struggled for a good length of time, probably a month or two, and we were almost at a desperation stage where I was supposed to have a bullpen one day, and I got hit around the start before, and it was kind of like, we're talking about it and what happened, and it keeps going back to I didn't have command of my fastball. I didn't have command of my fastball, and eventually, if something's not working, you got to change it. You can't just keep hoping it's going to work out. And so I'd always thrown a four-seam grip up to that point and never really messed around with a two-seamer just because I couldn't. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the breaking ball. Like I couldn't consistently execute a four-seamer, so I didn't see the sense in trying to add another fastball at the point in time, which, maybe it was not the right thing to do. But, we just, during that bullpen, decided that now's the time. Now we need to try something different. And for whatever reason, it felt more comfortable in my hand, and I felt like I could, get to where I wanted to at release point a little bit better with that grip as opposed to a four-seam grip. And, from that point on, it gave me confidence in throwing a fastball as opposed to being a pitch that I shied away from or I didn't want to throw. All of a sudden, I had something that I felt like I could execute and put where I wanted to, and then that develops, confidence in the pitch, and then you start to learn that you can do this to get it to go glove side, do this to get it to go arm side, and then the whole, being able to throw a pitch and execute it where you want, that sort of stuff comes. But I don't think that really is possible if you're hesitant or not confident in throwing a pitch.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because like I've talked with Blake Trinan, so he added a really good cutter last year. But what people don't know is, Blake threw that cutter just playing catch before games for probably a year before he was like actually comfortable to roll it out in games. Like it definitely is a desperation move to be like, all right, we'll try it in the pen and go out and do it. So, it kind of goes against everything you think from a motor learning standpoint, and usually it's like an off-season adjustment. But obviously it worked. So what were the hardest parts of learning the two seam? Obviously it felt more comfortable, but what were the mistakes that you made, but also what were the mistakes that obviously you get teammates and, off-season guys, everybody who comes to you and asks what makes your two seam so good. What are the mistakes you see them making? What were the ones that you struggled with?
I think that at the very beginning, I think that the reason that it came to me quickly is because I didn't try to make it a two seam, so to speak. All I tried to do was throw it to a spot, execute a pitch, because that's all I'd ever done with a four seam was try to throw it straight to a spot. I think that where I and a lot of people probably get into trouble with it is trying to make it a two seam or make it run or make it sink, and you start to get on the side of the ball or underneath the ball, and it gets bigger. Hitters can see it, you can see it, and they recognize it, and it essentially loses that effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's some really good video of you from the 2016 World Series that I'm sure Christian Wonders has shown it to you a few times. Is just that what a lot of people don't realize is how long you stay in supination on a two-seamer. A lot of people think you have to like aggressively turn it over into pronation early in the deliver and try to make it do that stuff. But in reality, you're powering through the baseball and you're staying online with it. And that grip is taking care of the rest. And that's where the late movement is coming from instead of trying to being too big, too early. So in general, though, baseball is getting away from two seams, right? We're seeing more and more guys, trying to find ways to optimize spin rate with four seamers and pitch more up than they are down. What do you think's been why is it that you've been more successful staying with the two seam? Granted, you still do the four in certain situations, but why have you been so successful with the two seam even when others have started to struggle with it more and more?
I think that number one, guys throw so hard now. I'm not one of those guys. I can't sit there and rear back with four-seam fastballs and blow it by guys. So I think that I still have to rely on executing a pitch to a spot and pitching more so than throwing. And I think it also goes to the fact that that's what I feel more comfortable with is throwing that as opposed to four-seam. There's a lot of data that's out there that I have, as well that says that my four seam might play better to certain hitters than my two seam does. But, if I don't feel confident in throwing my four seam to that guy, it's not going to play up to what those numbers say. Or, historically, if I've faced a guy and gotten him out with a two seam, but a scouting report or data says that, he doesn't handle four seams well, you're going to always go back to what you have success with. That's what's going to give, again, confidence. That's what's going to give you confidence is what you've done and what you've seen have success for you. And so I think that despite more people throwing four seams, pitching up in the zone, that's not what I do well. That's not what makes me good. So that's kind of the reason that I don't think that I would be successful kind of going that route.
Absolutely. So since we're on like the pitch selection side of things, I know you and Christian Wonders had a really good time talking changeup this offseason. It was a high priority. What were some of the, historically you've struggled with a changeup. Your usage was I think it was 12%, back in 2012 when you were a new big leaguer, and then it's been down in the anywhere from kind of 4 to 6% over the last couple of years. It was up in spring training this year, and you threw it quite a bit last year. What were the biggest changes you guys made with the changeup this year? I know you've joked hey, tell Max to teach me his changeup over the years. What did you change, this offseason that's made it feel better out of your hand?
For me, my problem with it has always been that I never feel consistent with that pitch. I can throw a good one, but it doesn't necessarily register to me as why was that one good as opposed to one before it that wasn't good. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I have a great feel for that pitch. I think that's something that you're always working on, is having a good feel for all your pitches. And when I think it goes back to probably not having as high a level of confidence in that pitch as the other ones. But I think that, when Christian and I were talking about it, we kind of said that. We said that if you look at it, my changeup plays well when I throw it, when I execute it. If I throw a bad one, obviously it doesn't get good results. But when I execute it and throw a good one, it plays well to hitters, number one, because they're not expecting it. But, it plays off my fastball. And so we kind of talked about how I grip it, how I throw it, things like that, and just trying to find a way to be more consistent with it. And it ended up we changed my grip is the same as far as the positioning of my hand. We just moved my hand to a different place on the ball. So whether you want to say my grip is different or my grip's the same, but holding the ball in a different spot it feels closer to the way my fastball feels. So I think that then that gives you the reassurance that the ball is not going to slip out of my hand. I'm not going to spike it 50 feet or that kind of stuff. And then when you have that that feeling that you can throw it to where you want to, then you start to throw it with more conviction and you get better action on it. Or you can start to, I mean, the other night I threw a right on right changeup for a strike. It was probably the first time I've done that in a handful of years.
I don't think I've ever seen one. I think I've watched every start since 2013 or so.
Yeah, and I think it's just that comes from, number one, it's spring training. So if you're going to work on something, this is the time to do it. But even in a spring training game, if you have to have conviction to throw that pitch as a right-handed pitcher. So I think that just having the ball feel closer to the way my other pitches feel in my hand kind of allows you to go out there and not have to try to guide it or force it to get to a spot, but actually throw it and let that action take over instead of trying to, like we talked about, manipulate it.
Absolutely. And so you're speaking a lot to, like, kind of comfort drives a lot of things. Is how does the ball feel in your hand and how can you build from that? So is there like a tripwire for you in the bullpen when there's a certain pitch or there's a certain ability to locate where everything is going to be, this is going to be a game where I go out and I punch out 16 or 17? And at the other end of the spectrum, are there days when all right, I'm not feeling this, I need to make an adjustment and pitch to a different strength today? Like, does the bullpen tell you everything you need to know?
I would say, but between the bullpen and playing catch and kind of maybe the first hit or two, just kind of seeing how, because I think as in a bullpen or playing catch, you can think that you see something, but when you see how a hitter's reacting to it, I think that really tells you the truth. But I think that for me, the biggest thing is when I can get that comeback on my fastball to glove side. I mean, I think that's when I'm getting that, I kind of know that my delivery's in its sweet spot. I'm getting extension, I'm staying on line, my backside's getting through all that stuff that I need to do to execute that pitch to that spot. When I can do that consistently, that's when I know that, all right, my delivery is where it needs to be. Now it's just a matter of going out and executing each pitch. It's not like, oh, shoot, this is out of whack. Now I got to figure out how to do this while still trying to go out and execute a pitch so that I can put it where I want to put it.
I've said that to guys a lot. Is like everything plays off a glove side fastball. If you can execute that, you can figure everything out. Do you have what's the actual sequencing of your pregame bullpen? How many pitches do you throw? Is it a certain number of each, or will you tinker with it based on how you feel?
It's pretty much set in stone. I mean,
that's shocking.
Whether I execute 10% of the pitches or 90% of the pitches started, I pretty much throw right around 35 pitches. The same routine. Wind up first, then out of the stretch. Just throwing fastballs and then throwing your off-speed pitches off the fastballs, going back to the fastball, then your next off-speed pitch back to the fastball. Because I think that for me, I have to have the ability to put my fastball where I want to in order for the other stuff to play off of it. So that's kind of how I mentally go through it during the warm-up is, all right, execute your fastball, now execute your changeup off of that, go back to executing a fastball, execute your cutter off of that, execute another fastball, execute your breaking ball off of that.
So building on that, you actually just alluded to like the concept of like reading the first couple of hitters. I'm going to throw a stat at you. I can't remember if I mentioned this before. In 2017, there were only two pitchers on the planet whose OPS against actually went down the third time through the order. It was you and Max. You guys both won Cy Youngs that year. I think obviously that's in part because you have a diverse offering and are less predictable, right? You're both throwing, not just a breaking ball, a changeup, and a fastball. Like in your case, you have two fastballs. You have a breaking ball you can shape differently. You have the cutter. You have the changeup. Max obviously has a four seam. He's got a cutter. He's got a slider. He's got a curveball. He's got a great changeup. So part of it's just it's easy to be less predictable when you have a big offering. And certainly you guys are both well conditioned that you do well into those innings, but it also has to come back to you reading hitters. And this was actually what Christian wanted to know about the most is, what are you looking for at hitters on a pitch by pitch basis, as you sequence, whether it's lefties, righties, or specific pitches? Are there things that, are jumping right out at you, and can you see it in real time, or do you have to watch video?
I think that you learn to see it in real time. I think that I'm looking at the way a hitter reacts to a pitch, not necessarily. I mean, you go into a game with an idea of how you want to attack each hitter, based on scouting reports, based on what you've done against him in the past. But I think that I try to pay attention to the way hitters react to pitches. So if I throw a fastball away to a guy and it looks like it gets on him, then, to me that means that, okay, he didn't quite pick that up, or he reacted to it a little bit later. So, I can stay out there. Whereas if you throw one and a guy's right on it and he fouls it right back, okay, he read that ball well out of my hand. He was on it. Let's make an adjustment off of that, whether it's be throw a breaking ball or now throw him a fastball inside or throw him a cutter to try to get him to ground out to shortstop. So I think that it's not, for me, I'm not married to a scouting report. Like, we have an idea of how we want to attack guys, but then I think that you have to, or at least for me, you have to take that idea and then use the real-time reaction that you get from them, the feedback from that, to then make your determination on what's next. And I think that a lot of that also goes to you knowing a catcher and a catcher knowing you and being comfortable with each other, to where, honestly, I don't like to shake that much.
I was
during
just
a game,
going to say that you rarely do, so you must be very sure of it.
I think that it goes. The reason that I don't like to shake is because I feel like it messes with, personally for me, it messes with my rhythm to shake a bunch, and I would rather kind of have confidence in the catcher that, we're on the same page and this is what just happened, and now we both know this is what we want to do next. They put a finger down. All right, let's go with it. There's a reason why he's doing this, not questioning him, and then all of a sudden I'm questioning him. I'm questioning myself. Is this the right pitch? Did he see something I didn't see? And so I think that I put a lot of faith in the catcher, in the fact that we've discussed things beforehand and we are approaching the game the same way and want to attack guys the same way, and we have the same idea of how I'm going to be successful doing that.
So, and that you literally started to answer my next question. So I joke with guys that my favorite player that I've never trained is Jan Gomes, because I've watched him catch you every game or pretty much every game since 2013 or so, right? And so Gomes has obviously moved on to Washington. So you're throwing to Roberto, who you've thrown to in the past, but you're also throwing to some new guys that you haven't thrown to. So, and I think that's a good lesson for, you'll get minor league guys who might throw to 8 catchers in a season, or guys going to spring training who are throwing to catchers they've never met. What's kind of like your goal in initially meeting with a catcher, talk about giving feedback to them and building that rapport is help a young pitcher kind of ask for what he needs from a catcher, if he's kind of put in your situation?
I think first and foremost, you have to know what it is you need. I think there's some guys who need, they need a catcher to kind of get on them and if, kind of fire them up, so to speak, at times. I think there's guys who need a catcher that is going to have, a calming influence over them. I think that there's some guys who want to talk in between innings, want to talk in between starts. There's guys who just want to be left alone. So I think that you first have to recognize what works for you. But then I think it just goes back to initially, you kind of feel each other out, get to know each other. And for me personally, or for us during bullpens, they're seeing how your delivery looks from their standpoint. Like, they might have seen you on TV, but from their perspective now catching you, it's a lot different, how your pitches play, things like that. And then you're kind of getting a feel for where they set up, how they receive the ball. And then from that point in time, it's just talking with each other, collaborating with each other on, what they see, what you see, what you want to do, what they think you could do. And it's just talking and having conversations and kind of learning. And that's how you get on the same page, is through talking and communicating with each other. And I think that from that point in time, it just starts to develop and become stronger.
Absolutely. No, and that's predominantly feedback between starts, but it needs to happen between innings as well, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that, I usually literally walking off the field every inning, we'll talk to the catcher about whether it be the hitter that was just in there or pitches throughout that inning, or if they see something. Like, I mean, it a lot of times doesn't even wait until we're in the dugout.
Yeah.
It could even go as far as if I give up an RBI single and I'm backing up home plate, walking back to the mound, getting the ball back from him, we'll have a quick, 1 or 2 sentences about something, that just not waiting too long to do it. But I think that's that's the working together part of it. You're not out there on the mound by yourself. You're working with that guy. The two of you are a team.
Absolutely. So we'll shift gears a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit of kind of throwing / training. So you're obviously known for your durability, 5+ years, over 200 innings pitched, and from working with you, we've come to realize it's kind of a moving target. You see how you respond to those high workloads, whether it's how long you take off in the off season, and what you do between starts. So let's first talk about your 5-day rotation that you employ in terms of throwing. So from the day that the minute that the game ends, what does your throwing session look like before your next start?
The day after I pitch, I like to throw because I like to get my arm moving and feel like things aren't getting stuck, so to speak, from pitching the night before, day before. So I like to throw that day. I don't necessarily throw aggressively that day.
Mm-hmm.
I might go back to 100 feet, 120 feet. More so just I want to feel my arm moving. I'm not necessarily getting after it. I'm not trying to execute a pitch or anything like that. I want to feel my arm in certain spots, yes, but it's not an aggressive throwing session, just more so trying to get the arm moving and kind of break up all the stuff, so to speak. And then the next day is the day that I throw my bullpen. So I'll stretch it out to maybe 200 plus that day. Get loose, get a little bit of arm strength, stuff like that. Go through my bullpen, which is pretty much the same as my routine in the bullpen before I pitch. 35 pitches. Maybe if during a bullpen, if it doesn't go well, I might, throw an extra 5 to 10 to work on something. The next day after that, I would call it day 3. I would say that I probably go 150-ish that day. Kind of work my way back from there, and then once I get out to 150, on the way back in, pretty aggressively, not really pull down, so to speak, but aggressively working my way back in from 150 feet. And then once I get in there, I'll throw all my pitches just with a guy standing up. Just I like to throw them. I like to have that repetition of not just throwing fastballs. So I'll throw a couple of everything and call it a day. And then the day before, distance-wise, I probably only go out to 90 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Go out to 90 feet, come back in, and I'll throw a 10 to 15 pitch flat ground. Just again, trying to just re-ingrain the delivery, and then just get a feel for throwing each pitch that day type thing.
Absolutely.
And then I'll go through after that. I'll go back on the mound and do some dry runs for maybe 5-10 minutes.
Gotcha. And I think a lot of people listen to that, and you have to be careful what you take from it. There's be kids that say that Corey doesn't believe in long toss and this, that, and the other. It's depending on the time of year. So in the off season, the time you start throwing will vary based on workload when the season ends and all that. But you are a guy who will stretch it out really good. You'll also do it in 20-degree weather at times. How far out do you like to take it? And maybe give them a little bit of insights into what we've done on like the long toss, the weighted ball side of things in the off season as well.
Yeah. I'm not against long toss by any means. I just trying to manage volume and manage workload throughout the course of the season. Mm-hmm. For me, I don't feel the benefit of really stretching it out and stuff. I'd rather save those throws for closer in on the mound for, where I'm actually going to be having to do stuff. But yeah, during the off season when we're building up arm strength and stuff, I like the long toss, stretch it out. I like to take my time throughout the course of the off season getting back there. I don't like to aggressively work my way back to long toss and then spend a lot of days out there. I'd rather kind of slowly build my way up throughout the course of a few weeks to a month to get stretched out, and then once I'm out there, to then start becoming more aggressive at that point. But yeah, I'd say during the off season, we've probably stretched it out to 240, maybe even 270 sometimes if it works out, weather wise, schedule wise, and we can get outside and do it.
And you like to read ball flight, like that's an important thing for you early on, because I know you, whenever possible, you like to avoid throwing in the net. And talk about why that's the case. I know, like even playing catch the first couple weeks in December, you always want someone who's throwing with you to give you that level of feedback.
Yeah, I think that it's trying to re-ingrain that muscle memory of, for me, I don't throw once the season's over. I don't throw until I start my throwing program. So I've gone sometimes a month and a half plus without throwing at that point. So I think that things can change as far as the way you feel or what you think you're feeling pretty quickly in that sense. And so for me, the reason that I like to see the ball in the air as opposed to just throwing into a net is that I think not having a great grasp when you first start on how you want it to feel, you can sometimes get into bad habits, whether it be, you feel like you're powerful through your throwing motion, but maybe you're getting on the side of the ball or something like that. And I'd rather see it and know that my hand's in the right spot and I'm releasing it the right way, things like that, to get that initial feedback and hopefully not go too far down the road in the off season of doing it incorrectly.
Absolutely. One of the highlights of our previous, actually 2 off seasons ago, I think it was on Friday morning. I got a text message, and I think it was me, Pete Dupuis, Drew Verhagen from the Tigers was on it, who's one of his close friends. It was from Christian Wonders. And the text was, playing catch with Papa K on Monday for the first time. And I think it was like a fire me up, let's go text message. You want to tell the story of what happened in your first throwing session with Christian on that Monday?
Yeah, that was probably one of the ones where we should have just maybe made the 5-minute drive down the road to a turf field instead of tried to get cute and throw indoors with white walls and not probably a great background to play catch in, but we were throwing on the turf. I think since the wall has been painted red.
Yeah,
but
we learned our lesson.
They were white at the time, and we got back to probably 90 feet, and I guess it goes back to that wanting to see the ball flight and stuff. I had thrown probably 5 or 6 good 2-seams to him at 90 feet, and then the next one did not get my hand in the right position, and it, instead of running, it cut, and it was late cut, but yeah, he didn't get a glove on it. I thought initially that it hit him in the chest because it didn't really phase him. Like it hit him, and then he
wore it like a champ.
He hesitated for a second, walked over, got the ball, and kept throwing. And so I was like, man, like I squared him up. I thought it would have at least knocked the wind out of him or something, and then we get back into like 45 feet, and his eyes swollen and starting to shut and stuff. And the next day he's got a black eye, and he never made mention of it to me that day. I didn't know until like the next day, really, that it hit him pretty much square right in the face.
You wore it like a champ. That's a great catch.
He did.
Great catch partner right there. Quality teammate.
So he's improved. He's improved since then. I don't think he's missed any since.
Not only that, he's probably caught bullpens over the years. He's cleaned it up. Christian's a heck of a receiver now. So battle scars though, and good lessons or good stories to tell his grandkids, right? So all right, so let's talk training a little bit because this is kind of where some of the stuff we've done maybe has deviated a lot from what most guys do on 5-day rotations and even like the off-season stuff. So speaking in the context of off-season stuff, like for a long time, you had been a 4 day a week guy all the way through the off season. I'd say probably 2 years ago, we would start going in 4 days, and then we'd taper it back to doing like 3 days a week of full body as the off season got going on. And tell me about a little bit about kind of like why you felt like we needed to trend that direction, and how it's changed things up for you.
Yeah, I think that I, generally speaking, I like to get in the weight room. I like to move weight. I like to do stuff. So I think that's why we always went with the 4 day routine. Is I feel better the more often that I'm doing stuff. I don't usually take a recovery day, so to speak, throughout the year, just because the more I'm moving, the more I'm doing stuff, the better I feel. So that we always went with 4 days with, movement days as well, things like that. But I think that I started to recognize that whether it be logging innings or getting older, I wasn't recovering from doing that. I would go in and I would get in a lift on Monday, and Tuesday I would feel like I couldn't do what I wanted to do in there, or it was way too hard to do what I wanted to do. And then by the time Thursday rolled around, I still couldn't do what I wanted to do. And then Friday, it was like, all right, I just got to try to get through this. I can't get anything out of it. I just got to try to get through it. And so I think that recognizing that it was probably too much for me at that point in time, having to adjust and compress things into one fewer day. That way I gave myself a chance to recover so that, number one, I didn't hurt myself, but number two, I could attack my sessions the way that I wanted to and not just feel like I was going through the motions.
Absolutely. And we even talked too about kind of a little bit of a shift, and I'll go off on like the mini soapboxes. If you look at the research, strength actually sticks around really, really well. To the point that you could probably go in and do one heavy lift every, 25 to 30 days, and you're probably not going to really detrain your strength much. So you've done a good job over the years of building a really solid foundation. But one of the things that we actually realize that a lot of athletes fall off with the quickest is kind of the power development side of things, having to train speed, and that's something that we've hit a lot more in the offseason. So kind of paring back a little bit in the weight room, doing more sprinting, more jumping, more med ball stuff, just a chance to give you that regular exposure to that, but also consolidating those stress into specific blocks throughout the week instead of trying to beat you up every day is important. But that's also played into kind of what we've done with 5 day rotations in season. So maybe talk about the different approaches that you've had with respect to lifting between starts, what we've done the last couple of years, and then, kind of where you're headed now.
Yeah, I think on that same, focus of recovering, like the way that I look at a 5 day routine is you're trying to use those 4 days in between starts to get yourself, number one, to feel the best you can when it comes your day to pitch. But number two, to feel the same every time it's your day to pitch. I don't want to feel great one time and then feel like I'm dragging the next time, and then the next time I feel great again. I'd rather maybe give up a little bit on that day that I feel great in order to not have that day that I'm dragging. So I think that kind of having that consistent feeling the day that I pitch is what drives how we schedule the days in between. And I think that the same thing, we used to lift hard twice between every start, and same thing, didn't feel like I was, by the time August, September got around, I just wasn't quite recovering as well, and we were having to back off of lifts and stuff. But we made it work. We would make the adjustment and stuff, but I think that our idea in making those adjustments was that maybe there's a better way to do this to where we don't have to drastically change it so much throughout the course of the year, but we can have a plan that will, kind of ride out how good you feel in June throughout the course of the rest of the season.
Absolutely. So last year you actually lifted immediately post game, which is a little bit of an organizational disaster. Having the barbell like loaded for you when you come out and modifying the amount of volume that you would do, in that session. based on what the workload in the game was. So the goal there was to kind of consolidate stress and then, make day one a real, a good recovery day, which allowed you to lift again on your bullpen day, and then kind of have those 2 wild card days, depending on how you felt, where you could push volume or pare back on it a little bit with the sprinting you did, the throwing you did, the med ball stuff you do. This year, plan of attack, you're going to go back to the day one lift, right?
Yeah. So instead of lifting after I pitch, going to try to do more of a reset after I pitch. So, before last year, I would pitch, come in, do my shoulder stuff in the training room, and be done with it. Never really did anything to counteract all the forces and the things that get in different positions out of whack by pitching. So now the idea is more to, after I'm done pitching, spend 30 minutes in the weight room kind of doing what I call a reset to try to hopefully speed up the process of recovering or getting things back in the right spot, so to speak.
So getting back to neutral.
Next day. Yeah, so that the next day I can have a good lift, but part of that lift doesn't have to be making sure that things are aligned from the day before.
Exactly.
So I think that, we talked about last year, I felt like I recovered really well from lifting after the games and lifting after my bullpens, but we both thought that maybe I lost a little bit more throughout the course of the season from not being able to be as aggressive in those lifting sessions.
Yeah.
And so I think that hopefully trying to find the middle ground with those two concepts will hopefully allow me to recover as well as I did last year, but maintain, my base like I had in years previously.
Absolutely. And you've been a big Mark Pro guy since kind of before it was cool to be a Mark Pro guy. When do you utilize it, and is it a daily thing, and how do you time it up?
I kind of use it when I feel like I need it. Like if my arm's a little cranky one day and I need to, wake it up, I'll use it before I throw, before I go to the field. Or if I feel like it was extra stressful to do things when I was out there throwing that day, I'll use it post to try to, again, speed up recovery and get things pumped out of there that don't want to be in there. So I don't really have a routine with it. I more so kind of listen to my body as far as when I feel like it's necessary to do it, because the biggest benefit I feel from it is that it gets, those muscles pumping, gets things moving. And that's when I feel the worst is when things aren't moving or moving well. So the more I can get them moving, the better I feel in general.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing too is you can probably do a little bit less in that regard because you are really good about getting manual therapy between outings. What's kind of like from a soft tissue standpoint, what do you like to do on those 4 days between starts, day by day?
Yeah. Honestly, it's probably something every day. The day after I pitch is, aggressive soft tissue on my arm. The next day of my bullpen, do some activation stuff prior to going out and throwing, and then some manual shoulder exercises afterwards. Day after my bullpen, I'll generally do dried needling, and then the day before I pitch, a flush just to kind of get everything hopefully feeling good for the next day.
Absolutely. All right, so we're gonna rock and roll with the lightning round here. These are the shorter answers.
Okay.
So, what advice would you give to a teenage Corey Kluber?
Be patient.
That's a good answer. What about college Corey Kluber?
Be more outgoing.
All right. What about minor league Corey Kluber? Probably the same be patient as the teenage Corey Kluber.
Yeah, probably.
I got you.
You always want to be at the next level, be at the big leagues, but in all reality, if you're not there, there's a reason why, and you have to kind of trust that process.
If you had to describe John O'Neill's personality in one adjective, what would it be?
Sneaky.
There you go. So it's a combination of quirkiness, hidden wit, all that stuff. It's a great one. What's more important, stuff or command?
Command.
All right. Favorite teammate of all time and why?
I'll say Carlos Carrasco, just because, I mean, number one, he's a great guy. You know, he's there for other people, but I think that he keeps things light every day when you come to the field, you know, joking around. And I think that's important throughout the course of the season, is that, you know, things have to be, you can't be all serious, all business all the time throughout 180 days.
Absolutely. Now, what pitchers do you like to watch and why?
Honestly, I will watch. It doesn't matter whether it would be Max or Kershaw or a guy who just got called up the day before. I mean, I think that when guys do something well or do something that is uncommon, I think that's what's intriguing to me, is watching guys, you know, do something either I can't do, or watch them do something that people don't do often.
So find inspiration wherever you can.
Yeah.
I like it. All right. So one of the things that we also are talking about with a lot of the young athletes and coaches on this podcast is, you know, like what are they looking for? So you're gonna have college coaches, high school coaches that are listening to this. What are some of the characteristics that you've noticed in the coaches that have had the most profound impact on you? What do you look for in a coach that you know is really going to be able to help you? And at the opposite end, what are the characteristics of the ones that maybe have kind of been roadblocks to your development?
I mean, I think that the most important thing about coaching or being coached is communication, you know, and I guess that goes back to the ones that don't work as well. Is, you know, I think that the ones that do stuff good are ones that communicate and you talk about things together and you figure things out together. The ones that, at least for me, haven't worked out well are the ones that are married to an idea and you're going to do it this way and this is the only way it's going to work. Just, you know, nobody's the same. That might have worked for somebody else, but it might not work for you. So I think that trying to force the issue on something usually creates pushback from the athlete, but it also, you know, it doesn't develop a good relationship to the point where they probably aren't going to have as much trust in you moving forward with what you tell them, if you're trying to make them do something that, even if it's just the way that you say it, doesn't make sense to them.
All right. So in closing, one of the things that we know is that behind every successful man is usually a badass woman, and Amanda is a great example. She's a fitness and healthy eating enthusiast. Talk a little bit about what that's meant for facilitating your success in the challenges of kind of like a crazy major league calendar with a young family.
Yeah, she's unbelievable in the way that she, you know, handles raising the kids, honestly, by herself for probably a third of the year. You know, we're on during the season, last half of the year, and we're on the road for half of that. So, you know, I think that having that confidence in her that she can handle that stuff obviously makes it easier to go out and approach your workday without having to worry about. Obviously, you're still worrying about it, but worry as much about, you know, what's happening at home away from that you don't have an impact on or have control over. And I think that, you know, in a lot of ways, a family can be, I guess, I don't know if reassuring or calming would be the right word, but like, you know, you're so focused on baseball, doing this throughout the course of the day, that I think that having, at least for me, having a family to come back to when that's over helps me to get away from it, to where you're not digging yourself in a hole. But
Absolutely.
I think also, you know, like we talked about, having the reassurance that everything's going to be taken care of, because she does such a good job with it, that, you know, there's a lot of things that I probably do or should deal with that I don't necessarily have to, because she takes care of them for me.
Absolutely. And in wrapping up, you guys have done some really cool stuff together with the Kluber Family Foundation. Talk a little bit about what it is, how it originated, and how listeners can support it.
I mean, it originated just Amanda and I have had a lot of opportunities through the Indians, to visit different places, to have different people come to the field. And we recognized that, number one, it was a good experience for the people that we were able to meet with. But number two, it was a good experience for us as well. It was something that was impactful for us. And we felt like we wanted to do more in that sense. And, the community that we have, or that we've worked with in Cleveland, has always been great to us. So trying to figure out a way to in turn do more for the community. So we started the foundation, which is, the one thing that we always would come back to, with whether we would visit people or they would visit us, was the pull of kids who were ill. Just it pulls at your heart, but I think that you can also see how impactful just making their day better can be for them. So trying to do things for those kids, whether it be having them come out to the ballpark and watch batting practice, or raising money, or doing something in a hospital to make their stay there better. That's the overriding goal of it, is just to try to make the struggles that they're going through a little less.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So folks can learn more about it at corykluber.org. They can find you on Instagram at ckluber28. I'd say you update that at least twice a year. You're really overachieving on the social media side, right?
Yeah, I'm a big social media guy.
Absolutely. Well, with that said, obviously it's been awesome working with you for an extended period of time, but also seeing, I think, all the hard work that goes in behind the scenes that a lot of people don't realize. So hopefully over the last hour or so, we've gotten a chance to glimpse into that, and some of the young players and coaches and parents can really take a lot from this. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Best of luck this season.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the first official episode of the Elite Baseball Development Podcast. To stay up to date with the show, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the show, and you can do so by reaching out to Eric Cressey personally on Instagram or Twitter at the handle @EricCressey, by emailing us at elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com, or by leaving a review for us to read on iTunes. If you enjoyed the show, we'd lastly ask that you please share this with a friend, colleague, teammate, or anyone else whom comes to mind. We really do appreciate you taking the time to listen to our show, and we'll see you next time.